Paul Bracewell, thanks for doing this. How did you move to Newcastle United come about?
Let's go back a few years. Back in the day, the third Saturday in May, you were offered a contract, and if you didn't want to sign a contract, you could turn it down, and then your name was put on the PFA list. I played for Sunderland in the cup final '92. Sunderland offered me a 1-year contract, which I declined, and my name was put on the list. A friend of mine from Liverpool rang me up and said, Terry Mack's been on and said that your name's on the list. They're just checking to make sure, obviously, it was true, and I said yes. So then I got a phone call from Terry to say that Kevin would like to meet you on Sunday night at the Gosforth Park. So I said, right, no problem. I said to the wife, just put the answer machine on and don't answer the phone. Went to Gosforth Park, met Terry in reception, and got took up to Kevin's room, opened the door. First time I sort of met Kevin sort of face to face. And to be fair, before we went anywhere with anything, he said, look, you've obviously been a captain at Sunderland. If you sign for Newcastle, obviously it's going to be a massive move. If you want to turn around and go out the door now, I quite understand it. But if not, please stay. So I stayed, and we agreed something, and then Monday morning was in for a medical, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, the rest is history. What was it like pulling on the black and white shirt, Brace?
Yeah, it was always going to be, obviously being at Sunderland and coming across to Newcastle, I always know, and this obviously, I think to one of your questions further down, it was always going to be a massive move. If things went well, then obviously it would have been great. If things didn't go well, I knew I was in for a rough ride, you know.
What was your first memories of Kevin Keegan? Obviously, you met him, you signed for him. It sounds like it was very, very easy to sign for Kevin. But what was he like those first few weeks for you being at the club and just seeing how he operated?
Well, it all went back to when I first sat down with him. Signed a 3-year contract. Want you to be pivotal of it. We're going to take Newcastle forward. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to sign players. We're going to make it exciting. Want you sitting there with your experience. So everything that he said to me and we discussed really on the Sunday has sort of followed through. From that, I was the first one in. I think from the following season they stayed up and they continue to build on that.
What were your memories of the training ground? Were you training at Maiden Castle then?
Yeah, Maiden Castle, which was, and I was obviously living in Durham at the time, which was great. And I think at the time the ground was getting sort of redeveloped. So I'm sure lads who were there at the time, we had anything between 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people coming to watch us train. Kevin was very much, get the supporters in because some of them couldn't get games or tickets for the game. So it was another way of them coming down and watching them train. Great atmosphere. It was always very competitive. But obviously, the most important thing is we had to win games,
Who did you bond with that season? Who was your closest mate at the club?
I think we were all sort of close knit, Steve. As you know, when we've had reunions, everybody's turned up as if it was like yesterday, which I think was really showed you what sort of team we had individually and collectively, team spirit. That when something's been put on that's gone back 20 years, 25 years, nearly all the lads try and get there and turn up. I suppose the sort of mates really, Barry Venison, John Beresford, we were all good, Steve Howie, Lee Clark, Steve Watson, Robbie Elliott. It was a very close-knit squad, to be honest, Steve.
Yeah, it really was. Is there a favourite game that you played in? I mean, obviously you were a pivotal player. You were a big player that season for Newcastle. The first season you came along. Is there a game that stands out for you?
I think my debut, to be honest, Steve. It was Southend, scored a goal, and I think that was it really. That was the start of. I think we went 11 games on the trot, So I would say my first game was probably the one that I remember most. I mean, obviously been some great games after that, but I think your first game, obviously coming from Sunderland, was always going to be a big game for me.
Yeah, I remember that game. We got drenched, and it
Yeah.
wasn't the best game. I guess that's your best goal brace, is it, for Newcastle?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That's probably the reason why I said that, Steve.
I'll chuck this one in because obviously we did go to play Sunderland that season. Just for you as a player, what was it like? Going out at Sunderland's home ground. Especially with the record, the record amount of wins that Newcastle were hoping to achieve. Sunderland waiting for us. Was that probably one of the hardest things you had to do? Go down there after the years that you'd played at Sunderland.
Yeah, I think so. It was always going to be, it's a massive, as you know, the derby games are massive anyway. Again, added pressure, obviously making the move. And then obviously further down the line, I went back again. I mean, I think the biggest, thing that I could say, obviously not born in the northeast, but some of Newcastle supporters like the football. They know what they want. They want people to come in and have a right good go and tackle and do all those things and play good football. So that's the biggest thing I think from living in the northeast and playing in the northeast is they do know their footballers.
Yeah. Kevin Keegan's team talks. Can you take us through an average Kevin Keegan team talk? What was he like? Was he inspirational? Did he chuck teacups around the dressing room? What was it like inside the dressing room with the KK team talk?
I think how the games sort of evolved. Kevin would never speak about the opposition. It was always about us, what we were going to do, and just very, very positive individually and collectively. I mean, these days, they have an analysis about this, that, and the other, and it was very much, I've got good players, you're good people, go out there and show what you can do, and that was the sort of common theme, really, throughout the sort of period I was there with Kevin,
And Terry Mack, a lot of people ask the question, what was Terry Mack's role at the club?
Terry was a sounding board, obviously, for Kevin, and Arthur Cox was there as well. And it's one of those where it was a bit like the players, the team spirit. Everybody was together. He'd been a great player in his own right and won titles, won European Cups as well. So a lot of experience, and obviously speaking to the players individually as well as collectively. And it was always fun around the place. Always had a smile on his face, and always trying to get the best out of the players.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I mean, he was, I guess he was the yin to Kevin's yang. He was a bit like Peter Taylor and Brian Clough, wasn't it? Good combination.
Yeah, fantastic. And like I said, Arthur was there as well, and Derek Wright. It was a real good team behind the team, if you want to say that as well.
Yeah, 100%. Any funny stories from your time at Newcastle?
Well, I think the one that every when we go on, as you know, we get asked about the killer one with a haircut, So I don't think Brian would find that quite funny at the time. But there was a trip away, end of season. We'd done ever so well, had a few drinks, and then obviously a pair of scissors came out and somebody's hair got cut. So that was probably the funniest story I can divulge.
Who was the best player you played with at Newcastle?
Best player? There was a few, to be honest. We got Peter Beardsley, got Andy Cole, Rob Lee. I think Andy Cole had an unbelievable spell, but also, working alongside Peter Beardsley as well. But a lot of good players. But again, I think it was more as a team, because the team was so successful rather than individuals. And I think that was one of the biggest things that Newcastle had at the time. It was all about the team and not necessarily individuals. There were some individuals in there that got the glory, but it was always the team that produced on the field.
Finish off with a couple of questions. Just, the Newcastle won promotion that season comprehensively. And I guess we all remember the 6-0 half-time scoreline against Leicester at the end of the season and, going on to win that 7-1. What was it like walking around the pitch that day? And how far did you think that, the entertainers could go, when you walked around the pitch taking the applause of the crowd? Yeah,
it was, like you said, from early on from meeting Kevin and Terry in the Gosforth Park and signing for Newcastle 3 years and And it was the start of a real journey, and I think that journey has lasted a long time. And I know that they've had ups and downs since then, but people remember that era as a real football. And I think the biggest compliment I could say is when you speak to people in around that time, Newcastle were everybody's second team, which is brilliant, really. I think, you support your own team, but Newcastle was the team that everybody wanted to watch and see, and always full houses, whether it was home or away. So I think that would be the biggest compliment, that, like I said, Newcastle would be the second team.
Just give us a few lines on the fans as well. How important are the fans to the club?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in terms of the atmosphere, I was up there recently with a coach from Tottenham, and it's the first time he'd been to the stadium, and he was blown away by it. And I said, well, you want to come when it's full? And I think that's the one thing that, again, as a player, a spectator, everybody looks forward to going to St James's Park, purely simply because of the atmosphere and what the fans create. We know, being there as a player, people talk about the 12th man, like unbelievable atmosphere to play in front of, and the success they've had recently has been brilliant.
Just want to ask you about Pavel Srnicek. How just memories of Pavel Srnicek as well. I mean, obviously we lost Pavel a few years ago. Just any memories of him?
I think that first and foremost was he was just a real nice guy, top guy. And he worked so hard at the game. But for me, the memory was him as being a top person. Would do anything for you, kind as anything. Wanted to be the best as well. Would train hard. That he's sadly missed because, like I said before, he was just a lovely man.
Last question, Paul, just about the local lads. How important was it to have the local lads, as part of that team? The likes of Lee Clark, Steve Howie, who you mentioned earlier. Alan Thompson obviously played his part in those early days as well. There's so many you could talk about. Steve Watson. How important was it to have those, our own class of 92 as part of that journey?
Yeah, I think Sir John Hall was a real big advocate of, let's get the local lads through. And then I think when you have that, and I work in an academy, it's so important because what they bring to the table, it means so much to them. And if you can get that right, sprinkling of players, youth players coming through that live in the northeast, and obviously you get your experienced players as well. That's what the fans love and can relate to as well. And it's brilliant that you can produce players in the northeast that want to play for Newcastle and don't go anywhere else.
Paul Bracewell, thanks very much.
Okay.